So Tim, let's talk running.
Thank you, Amelia. Okay, guys, just before we start, are all of you doing the running program on the 12WBT? Hands, can I see your hands? That's quite a lot of you, great. Well, today's session hopefully will give you a little bit more understanding about what you should be trying to achieve when you're doing your runs, what sort of form you should be trying to achieve. We'll also explain about if you're a certain type of runner, like a heel striker or a toe striker, explain what's happening when you do that and what things you can do for injury prevention to make sure you don't get injuries if you're that type of runner. We'll also talk about the common injuries, some things you might be getting, little niggles, little pains, how to help correct that, and as well as go through with Amelia some of the exercise that you can do, nice and safe, really easy stuff to help you along throughout the challenge. So I'm going to split into 3 sections. We'll talk about this forward running technique that a lot of people are sort of talking about today. Then we'll go through the common injuries. Now, injuries, I mean, these are things sometimes that you might think of just as pain, but they might actually be an injury. But where I work in the clinic, a lot of those injuries are simply, and I'd say about 80%, are muscle imbalances. So people who've got problems maybe left or right or front or back, and they're not so good on one side, and when they go running, over time, those problems come out and give them an injury. So a lot of the time, these things can be fixed just by simple exercises, simple stretches that you can do. And we'll also talk about when that little niggle becomes an injury, and learning how to know the difference between pain from injury or just pain because you've had a long run. And then we'll go through those exercises in injury prevention.
I just want to jump in for a moment and say it's really sad sometimes where you hear people say, oh, I've just got dodgy knees, or, you know, I started running but my knees got sore, so I'm clearly just not designed for running. When, as Tim says, a lot of the time they're just literally a simple case of weak muscles and tight muscles having a fight with each other, and that a few simple preventative, or what we like to call prehab exercises, can alleviate that. So we're hoping that today, for those of you that are like, oh, I started running but my knees got a bit sore, or I didn't quite feel right, the programs that we do will help to alleviate those issues.
Oh, exactly. And you'll see some of the exercises that we go through are on Michelle's program. So they're things you already know. We're just going to teach you when to do them and why. So let's talk about this forward running technique, because a lot of people, and I know myself, tends to land heel strike. And what I mean by heel strike, if I can show you guys, if you can watch me, heel strike is landing on your heel. You can hear me landing on my heel. All right, one of the most common ways of running, and it's very, very normal. Now, most of the time, long distance runners who run slow, like marathon runners, well, the elite run fast, right? The top guy at the moment who broke 2 hours and 4 minutes lands on his heel. Okay, so it's not a bad thing. Don't worry too much about people telling you to if landing on your heel is bad. Midfoot's like this. Can you hear the difference with that one? Okay, and then toe running, which you see some people doing, is different again. Now, I'm not that great a toe runner, so we'll see.
You need to sprint,
we'll see how we go, right?
Sprinters run on their toes.
Okay, got the idea? So heel strike, midfoot, and toe running, or forefoot strike. Now let's just break it down a little bit. When you land on your heels, this is normal when we walk. When we land on our heels, okay, you're supposed to do that when you walk because it controls the movement and basically breaks you and slows you down, which is what you want when you're walking. Otherwise, you'll fall over. So we need to land on our heels. When you land on your heels when you're running, if your foot is forward too much, it ends up too much braking, and that can lead to problems. And people who are doing overstriding, so they're running too far forward, so their upper body's back and they're doing this sort of thing, okay? And they're technically slowing themselves down when they run, which is not very efficient. The only problem when heel striking gives injuries is when you land on your heel and roll in too much, and we call that pronation. Okay, so when you're landing on your heel, we normally roll in, and if you're rolling in too much, so if I go this way and I land there and I roll in too much, it can affect what my knee's doing. You can see how that can cause some problems. Okay, Now, sometimes on short distances that doesn't matter. Long distances, longer times, it can lead to injuries. Now, if you're running on your toes is great for sprinting because you need that really hard platform, okay? Because when you run on your toes, the body locks all your bones up, gives you that really hard push-off, which is what you need. You don't want your heel dropping down, okay? But if you're doing that for a long, long period of time, that can lead to a lot of shock loading up through the leg and up through the spine. Okay, so some things to be aware of. It also increases the work rate of your Achilles and your calf and all that sort of thing. And if you're not conditioned to that, that can lead to problems. So you might be fine running sort of 3 or 4K on your toes. You increase it to 10K, that's when the body might say no. Midfoot running, which is what a lot of literature is talking about at the moment, is very quick strides, technically more efficient, less impact, but it does increase the work rate in the lower leg. So what I urge you guys today, and the takeaway from today is, make sure if you hear about, I should be midfoot running, don't try and change what you're doing. Just be aware if you're a heel striker, or if you're a midfoot striker, or a toe runner, there's some things that you need to be aware of as far as making sure you don't create an injury, okay, and making sure you're doing the exercises and stretches for the way you run. Okay.
So what you're kind of saying here is there's no right or wrong. Whether you're a heel striker, a midfoot, or a forefoot striker, it's not that one's particularly right or wrong, but just be aware of the pros and cons of each of those. And it's not a bad idea at the end of a run, not at the start. Once you've done a hard or long run, get your iPhone, have someone film you running backwards and forwards or running on the treadmill for a while, and you might actually find out a few things. You'll be able to clearly say, hey, I am a heel striker, or, I am a forefoot striker, and then know that, okay, if I'm forefoot and I'm getting Achilles issues, that could have something to do with it. But I love your point about don't go out tomorrow and just go, I'm going to run 10Ks and run completely differently, because you will get injured if that happens.
Yeah, and that's where people definitely do get injured. But just remember, at the moment, us physios, we like research, but there's no compelling or real research that shows that one is better than the other. Some research shows one's better, some shows the other one's better. So nothing's more than the other. So make sure that you don't go and take too much advice from a friend or a colleague about which way you should run.
Particularly midfoot and forefoot, because that's very much on trend at the moment.
But what you can do is work out your posture when you're running. I think that's the big emphasis today, is making sure you guys can slowly try and improve your posture or your form when you're running. Just like you're trying to improve your form when you're doing weights or squats or push-ups, you're trying to improve your form when you're running. A little bit harder than improving your form when you're squatting, because it's hard to think about trying to change your posture when you're running. You're trying to concentrate on not falling over and getting the breath right. But it is very important, because over a long period of time it makes a massive difference to injury prevention and to your efficiency when you run and how well you can run. So let's look at a few things. Upper body posture. The big one we try and make sure people do is your hips have got to be over your legs or your feet when you land. Okay? So what I mean by that is, when I strike the ground, when I'm walking, my hips are back because I'm braking, that's fine. When I'm running, my hips need to be over my foot. Okay? So therefore we try and get you running forward a little bit, like on a little bit of an angle, okay? I'll try and show you the two differences. This is me running with a backward posture. I might have to get some speed up here, okay? Okay?
I see a lot of those out there.
Very upright, and this is where people, they're trying to go, I want to be up nice and tall, and they're running like this. Okay?
Kind of Mr. Bean.
Yeah. Now that's fine.
Sorry,
up
Tim.
and down. That's right. So you can see how my body was behind my legs, if you like, and I'm always sort of behind myself. So I'm never very efficient in how I'm propelling myself forward. Whereas if I angle forward a little bit, okay, I'm running forward.
Usain Bolt. I just thought Usain Bolt when I saw
Usain Bolt,
that.
yeah. Good to watch the Olympics and slow those guys down and see how they run. Okay, so when you're thinking about that, it's not upright. It's a slight lean forward from the ankles. Make sure you're not leaning forward from the waist, right? Because that makes my hip go backwards. It's leaning forward from the ankle. It's hard to do when you're standing on the spot. You feel like you're going to fall over. But when you start your run, lean forward and away you go. Okay? And try and keep remembering to do that. If you forget, stop the run, lean forward and away you go again. Okay? So there's the first little tip. Your head, your neck, and your shoulders need to be relaxed. It's hard sometimes when you're at the end of the run when you're really breathing really hard, but if your shoulders are up here doing all sorts of accessory breathing, which is sometimes what can happen, okay, you're not going to do very well with your arm swing and your core if you're up here trying to run like this. Okay? At the same time, your head can't be forward like a chicken. Okay? And you see people doing this, and it's just awareness. Okay? Because sometimes you can actually get neck pain and back pain. It's very hard if you're like this to try and maintain good posture down here. Everything needs to be in alignment. All right? So just watch where your head is. Make sure it's not too far forward. Make sure you're not running up here, that sort of thing. And your arm swing, if you're going across your body, like some people tend, without even knowing
This
it,
is really common.
tend to run sort of, across their body. Now that's really going to chew up a lot of energy, wasted energy, going sideways when you're supposed to be going forwards. And if you watch all the marathon runners, and that's what they're doing this, by their sides. Okay? And you can take away the little tip of what sprinters try and do, and they pretend like you're holding 2 potato chips. We're not allowed to eat potato chips, though, are we?
No potato chips on 12WBT.
But you can hold potato chips. Pretend you've got a
Kale chips.
potato chip in the left hand, potato chip in the right hand, and you've got to hold them that you're not going to drop them, but you can't hold them too tight that you're not going to crush them. Okay, so when you're running, you've got to pretend you're holding 2 potato chips, leaning forward, head posture. Okay, and it looks a bit silly, but it's a very, very efficient way of running, and you'll feel like it feels a little bit weird. So what I suggest you guys do is pick one thing at a time. Okay, so each run you go out, pick one thing, try and slowly improve that. Once you've nailed that, pick another thing. Don't try and do it all at once, because you're going to just get too tired or it's going to be too overwhelming. Right? Next thing, core. Everyone talks about their core. Physio-wise, what I want you to think about is trying to keep your core in a good posture so it works properly. All right? If you run with your back out, and a lot of people do, they've got an anterior tilt in their pelvis, and they run with their bum out. I used to do that a wee while ago.
We call it the Donald Duck.
The
Are you
Donald
a Donald
Duck?
Duck or
And
are you a Pink Panther?
Yeah, and it might be because you're a little bit weak in your abdominals or you're too tight in your lower back. Some people have got very, very strong back muscles, and they're short, so they run in this sort of position. Okay, so they're running like that. Now that can lead to a lot of back pain due to muscle tightness, fatigue, loading up the lumbar spine, but also when you're in this position, there's no way your core can function properly. It needs to be in a neutral spine position. So have a check out whether you are running with your bum out a little bit more. Okay? Breathing is also a big one too. If you breathe with your mouth open all the time, you're doing accessory breathing. Now that's fine when you're getting to the end of the 10K or the end of your run and you're getting really tired, you need that extra breath, you need those muscles working way up here. But if you're doing that up here, one, you're going to fatigue all those muscles there, and so that you can't use them when you really need them. If you start using them at the start of your run, breathing up here, you can't do it at the end of your run because you're too fatigued. But also, if you're lifting your ribcage up, again, you're lengthening out here and you're losing that neutral spine.
And you'll probably get a stitch as well.
A stitch as well. So the best thing to do, breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. Now, you've probably heard this a million times, but I'm just trying to reinforce that you're doing it to try and improve what's happening to your posture in your spine, and also not overusing muscles that you will need later on in your run.
Tim,
Right?
I know that once I get puffed in my run, I find it really hard to breathe through my nose and out through my... I'm lucky to just be breathing like this. So
Yeah.
is it okay if you do have to flick over to breathing?
Absolutely. And you try and start within through the nose, and then if you fail at the end, then that's okay. But don't try and start breathing through and out through the mouth. Okay, that's
Yeah,
the
I
big
like
tip.
the rhythm as well. Everyone's a bit different, but I always try to breathe in for 2 steps and out for 2 steps. So in, out, out. in, out, out. And so it just kind of keeps you nice and relaxed and you're not panicking. I'm breathing, I'm not losing my breath, I'm okay.
Exactly. Now, also, this is all sort of linked in together. If you're not keeping your lower back in good posture, you're breathing way up to here, it's very hard to get your pelvic floor engaged too, if that's what you need to do for your core stability. And what I tend to help get people to do, especially when their pelvic floor is a little bit weak, okay, maybe they've got just general weak pelvic floor, maybe they've had children and their pelvic floor is weak from that. What I would try and do is work on their pelvic floor with their breathing. It actually helps you with your breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. Okay, so remember with the pelvic floor, breathing in through your nose, you're letting your pelvic floor relax. When you breathe out, you're drawing it back up. And you can actually practice that during your run, which will improve your core stability and stop you having to brace. Because the worst thing you can do is try and hold your tummy tight and go for a run. Okay, so we don't want that tummy really tight. We want it expanding and contracting. We want you breathing properly, and therefore the internal parts are your pelvic floor and your diaphragm working together, going up and down to keep that equilibrium.
So as you breathe in, you relax your pelvic floor,
That's
but as
right.
you breathe out, the man gets in the lift doors close, and the lift goes up.
That's right.
Is that how it works with pelvic floor? I think the man in the lift doors close, and the lift goes up.
Yeah.
That's how I remember pelvic floor.
Yeah, we try and, with guys in our clinic, we try and teach them to hold a pee and a hold a fart at the same time, and they sort of get it. Females get it a little bit better.
I like the lift analogy.
Yeah. Whatever works for you, I would try and work on that, okay? And it'll make a big difference. So try and think with your core, don't brace it, don't try and hold your tummy tight. Try and work on pelvic floor and posture, and you'll do a much better job, and you'll last for longer in your run as well. Okay, so little tips. When you're about to start for your run, most of us usually go for runs straight out of the house or straight out of work. Okay, and you've been sitting down. Maybe some of us have done a few stretches, but you haven't sort of reset your posture too much. So always make sure you're getting up, and the trick is reach for the sky as high as you can go, and then take your hands down and go for your run. Okay, so you've tried and lengthened up this slump posture. Okay, when you're running too, try and make sure you're running with your head forward. Don't look down at the pavement in front of you. People tend to sort of look down like this. So you can see my posture already is head forward, hunched over. Okay, hips not so good. So make sure you're gazing forward and your head is going forward. Okay, so you're looking ahead, looking at the distance, solving the world's problems when you go for your run. And try and march in place to get that legs under your pelvis. So what I mean is march like this, okay, marching in place. So when I go for that run, if I'm marching in place to start with, okay, a little lean forward the ankles, then away I go. Okay, makes sense? All right, so I'm trying to start my run like I want to continue my run. And then running light, of course, to avoid the pounding. The classic one you'll be able to hear on this stage is making sure you try not to land too heavy. Everyone who runs on a treadmill, you can definitely hear it, especially when the gym's quiet. So you don't want to be going...
Don't be a slapper.
Don't be one of these ones. Okay, landing too heavy. Okay, it's fine on short distances, but if you guys are trying to improve how long you're running for, if you run really heavy like that, it just plays a lot of havoc with impact through your muscles, tendons, joints, and that can lead to injury. So you've really got to try and run light. I like to tell people to imagine you're running on a sheet of glass. Okay, so you're not trying to break the glass. Okay, see if that works for you a little bit more. And that'll also help you with that forward lean part, because you've got to keep that momentum up to stop the braking, landing hard. Keep your head level, that'll stop you jumping up and down. So if you try and aim, if you've got that forward gaze in the distance, aim and look at something and try and keep your head. Imagine someone is watching you from the side and you're not allowed to bob up and down. Okay, going for your run, you've got to keep nice and level. The most classic example, if you see sprinters, and I know this is sprinting, but if you see sprinters at the Olympic Games, their heads do not move a centimetre. They're completely level all the way through, so they're very efficient. There's no vertical movement. They don't want any vertical movement. They've got to go horizontal. If they're wasting energy going up, okay, they're losing it and they won't be able to use it going forward. Okay, so same for you guys. And that little lean from the ankles without bending at the waist. Okay?
I have a really sort of a great routine that I do at the start of every run, and it's also a great way to get your head focused on your run, to stop any negative thoughts coming in. And I've got a little circuit that I do, a cycle that I repeat as many times as I need to. It stops the outside thoughts coming in and it gets you focused on your run. So I start my run, off I go. And then once I've got my breathing down, yep, I know where I'm going. Okay, that's all good. All right, off we go through my technique. And I start from my head and I work my way down to my feet. Go, is my head relaxed? Is my head back on my shoulders? Is my face relaxed? I'm not clenching my jaw. I don't have the forward head carriage. Is my head on top of my shoulders? Are my shoulders nice and relaxed? Am I breathing in rhythm? I call it train tracking my arms to avoid the sideways. Are my arms train tracking like this? Am I breathing through my diaphragm? And then I look down and make sure, are my feet roughly in line with my hips, or am I running like a catwalk model? Because running in a straight line like that is not good. You want to try to be feet under hips. So am I train tracking with my arms? Am I train tracking with my legs? And I keep going through, am I leaning forward? And I also have this funny thing that I do where I imagine there's a man in the sky in a little boat, and he's got a fishing line, and he casts the line out and he hooks me about between the bra just there. And he's just gently doing this, pulling me along, and it works really well running up a hill. Is the man in the boat, has he got my chest, and is he just gently pulling me along like that? And that tends to stop you gazing down. It tends to stop that forward head carriage. And when you're on a hill and you tend to start to do these ones and end up at the top of the hill like this, no, the man in the boat's actually pulling me up the hill. So that man in the boat's taken me a lot of places through a lot of marathons. Yeah. So that's a nice little circuit. And if you're focusing on one particular thing, as Tim says, you don't want to change too much, you might keep repeating that. But what you'll find is over time, when you learn about the right technique, you'll be able to go, oh my goodness, I am clenched in the jaw today. Oh, I'm really carrying tension up here. So you just go through the cycle. Before you know it, 15 minutes has passed, and all those negative thoughts, oh, I'm so tired, I'm so stiff, why am I doing this, I'm too busy, it's going to rain, they've all dissipated and you're in the zone. And that's ideally where you want to be when you're running, where you're just in that nice headspace.
And a medius fishhook idea is a great way of helping you with that forward lean. If you're sort of struggling to go at the ankles, go with that little fishhook as though you're pulling yourself along from the chest, and that'll hopefully get you a little bit angled forward rather than leaning backwards. So let's go through common running injuries. Now I've divided this into 3 groups for you guys. Knee and ITB pain, we've got back and hip pain, we've got shin splints and Achilles. So some things that are probably burning questions for you, or maybe you've got some of these things yourself. So let's talk about knee and ITB pain. Now when you're running, the most common area of pain you'll get is on that kneecap. Now it can be under the kneecap. A lot of people say, that's really under my kneecap somewhere. I can't really get to it. It's right under there and it's annoying. Other people will go, it's actually at the bottom of my kneecap. Okay. And then the ITB pain is on the side. So they can be 2 separate issues. Some people have both issues, both problems going on there. If you've got pain on the inside here, near this joint line, that might be a different problem that you may need to see the physio about. We won't worry about that today. But if you've got the kneecap pain here or the ITB pain, there's some tricks and things you can do definitely for that. One of the main problems with kneecap pain is the patella. So the kneecap doesn't sit in the groove in some people that well. Now that may be due to the muscle here not being very strong, because the VMO muscle here, which is called vastus medialis obliquus, the VMO, comes in here and hooks into the kneecap. Now it helps stabilize that knee and keep that knee in the groove while you bend and straighten your knee. If that's a bit weak, that kneecap can start moving out the side when you bend and straighten your knee.
Particularly if your ITB is tight as well. You've got this weak muscle here, this tight muscle here, and your kneecap just goes zoop.
Yeah. So you can have both things, weak VMO, tight ITB, and if you look at my shorts here, imagine it just does that to it, and it shifts that kneecap, and it can be even a millimetre in the wrong position over 10 kilometres. That can cause a lot of problems underneath the knee. That's why a lot of people feel like it's in the knee somewhere, because it's the surfaces and the soft tissues around the knee that get rubbed and pressurised and inflamed. And sometimes it's not even swelling, you can't even see anything. And technically it's not really an injury because nothing's torn or broken, but it's pain they're developing because the two surfaces are not sitting correctly. And like I said before, those are things that you can correct. Okay, they're not going to stop you running.
And
if you do
prevent as well.
And prevent. Simple stretches and simple exercises, which we'll go through. So ITB tightness is one of the keys. Remember, the ITB is a fascia band, it's not a muscle. Okay, so to try and really stretch it out is quite difficult. You need to put some pressure on it. We'll talk about the foam roller later. And that is connected from your buttock, or your glute max up here, and your TFL, a little muscle on the side. So those two blend into the ITB and go down to your knee. All right. So when we're rolling, we talk about rolling it, you've got to go all the way up into here. And some of the causes of ITB tightness is actually because their buttock's so tight, or their buttock's not working. All right. Big other things, knee pain happens a lot when people run, they land, and the knee rolls in. Now that can be due not to the VMO. Remember, don't get fooled. Knee rolling in is not about a weak VMO. The VMO controls the kneecap. The rolling in of the knee comes from the buttock. Okay? Now there's a lot of muscles in the end. Sometimes you'll hear me talk about glutes, where I package everything together. There's 3 glutes. There's also a lot of other little muscles that control rotation. Okay? For this sort of presentation, we'll just talk about the glutes. Okay? But they control you rolling in. And if they're weak and you roll in, imagine like the force that's going down through your leg. If you go on an angle, it's going to put the force somewhere else, which the body's not really going to like. So if I can correct my strength here, bring that knee back into alignment, happy days. Okay? And the last one is sometimes people, we're all different, right? Males tend to have pretty straight legs most of the time. Females, of course, because their hips are wider, have a little bit more of an angle on the femur. Now, in some people, mostly in females, but sometimes in males, have an excessively wide angle. So what happens, it's not necessarily that their hips are wider, they might have the same size as hips, but the angle of their femur is more this way. And what that does is pushes their knees in.
Does carrying extra weight have anything to do with your Q angle, or are you just born a certain way?
No, you're born a certain way, so it's a genetic type. Sometimes your mum and dad might have it. You might be a skinny person with a really excessive Q angle. But what does matter is if you have weight on top of a Q angle and you run, you're more likely to get problems. Okay? So the Q angle problem is when your knees really come in, but not necessarily rotate them. They're actually, I can't do it because my knees are straight, but they're actually in on an angle. And that should be probably assessed by a physio. So if you think that your hips are sort of normal or hips are wider, but you really see your feet, your femurs coming in, maybe get that checked if you've got pain or problems when you run.
Okay, so just quickly to recap on that, what you're saying is if you've got weak glutes or your glutes aren't stable or balancing you effectively, as soon as you hit the ground, because the glutes are a little bit weak, it may just microscopically have your knee rolling in slightly.
That's right.
So that then places a lot of pressure on your ITB to straighten it back out again, which can probably make that very, very tight.
Yep,
and then if you've got something like excessive Q angle or flat feet or your technique's not quite right, that's when you start to get those issues coming through.
Exactly. We'll talk about pronation and the shin splints part because it's one of the major causes. But if you've got all three, your femur rolls in, you pronate, and your hip drops, something's going to give, and that's when usually people come with knee pain. They come into our clinic, but again, a lot of the time it's exercises, stretches, correct a few things, and they improve really well. So it's not something that is going to stop them forever. Okay. All right, hip and back pain. Big one when you're running. Now, hip pain, when I talk about hip pain for this sort of presentation, I'm talking about pain in the front of the hip, okay? Not the back of the hip, the front of the hip. And this can be a number of things. Most commonly, it's your hip flexor either being too tight or overworking far too much. And the reason most of the time when it overworks far too much is not because it's weak or anything like that, it's because that is not working in the back because the hip flexor and the glutes have to work together to run. Okay, so if I'm going to push myself along, I need glutes to push me along. Okay, if they're not strong enough to push me along, I have to haul my leg through more. So I tend to use my hip flexor more because I'm going forward. If my weak glutes are weaker, and over time that can get it really tight. All right, it gets really sore, and you can end up having tears and problems in that. But some of the time it's just a simple matter of going in and stretching it out. Maybe it is too tight because you're running with that posture like that, and it's really short, and you're running like this. Okay, when you should be sort of more upright and coming forward. All right. Not having a very stable core. Over time, the impact, if the muscles aren't strong enough, can start causing problems. If your inner core, your pelvic floor is not that great, and you're going for a run, your body tends to compensate and use the outer core, so it uses its obliques, the big extensor muscles in the back. They tend to work harder and they get sore. And that's where some people come in and they've got really, really tight muscles, really thick, tight muscles in their back, and that's where their pain's coming from. And it's all just due to perhaps their pelvic floors aren't working so well, so the body tends to compensate. Again, they can be stretched out, core can be improved, and away you go. Pelvic tilt, we talked about that before, making sure you're not running like that. When you do pelvic tilt, what happens is you jam your lower back a little bit, your muscles tighten up, and they fatigue. And so a lot of people get lower back pain either towards the end or after their run. So they'll go to do their run, and they'll go and sit down and go, oh, God, because they've been standing up running in this posture like this, and it hurts over time.
A great way to test if you're a Donald Duck or a Pink Panther is to stand against a wall, put your head, shoulders and butt against the wall, feet out maybe 20 centimetres or so, and see if you can slide your hand in and see there should be just enough space there that you can just fit the thickest part of your hand against the wall. If there is daylight, you are totally a Donald Duck. And if there is just nothing and it's flat, which is most of the ballerinas out there are like that, then you're a Pink Panther. And even just doing those exercises, just standing against the wall will actually help to fix that. You'll feel you have to really engage your core to minimise that gap.
Yeah. And last one, hamstrings. Now, a lot of the time it's not necessarily your hamstrings are tight. Some people feel like they've got tight hamstrings, but it's actually their back. Okay, they go, I can feel it in my hamstrings. And that's because they're running out of range in their hamstrings because their back won't let go. So don't get too wound up about if your hamstrings are too tight. A lot of the time it's about hamstring weakness. Now in females, generally, I'm going to generalise here, they usually got weaker hamstrings compared to their quads than males. All right, so when you're going for a run, hamstrings push your leg backwards, hip extension. So when you're running, you need them a lot, especially in sprinting, that you really need them. If your hamstrings aren't working well enough, then you're going to start having problems where you have to make up for it in your back or make up for it in your hips. Okay, so if I can't push myself along, then I'm going to have to extend my back and lift my leg through. Okay? The other thing about hamstrings, the way you can work out whether maybe your hamstrings aren't that strong, one of the tips is your heel coming up high enough? And this is where you see people shuffle a little bit. They're not lifting their heel up, maybe due to a bit of lack of strength here. So they should be bringing their heel up. Okay, so maybe check that what you're doing, and is your heel not coming high enough when you run? All right. Shin splints.
Hurry along a bit if you want to get through everything.
Right, shin splints. Who up here has shin splints? Or gets shin splints? Oh, there's a few out there. Okay, now there's two types of shin splints. One on the inside of the shin bone, and that's the most common one, and on the outside of the shin bone. Now, shin splints is pain and inflammation from the muscle where it attaches down the bone line. So the muscles on the inside of the shin control the foot going inwards. So they slow me down. So the muscles here, when I land, they'll hold and control me downwards. Now, for some reason, maybe they're a bit weak, or maybe my bone structure is a little different. If I slap down too much and roll in far too much, those muscles have to work really hard and at a bad sort of biomechanical disadvantage, and they eventually start getting strained, they start getting inflamed, and there's your pain. The outside is usually when people come in and they've got tight calves, and they toe off too early. So what happens is they're in this position far too early, and their foot rolls in that position. They have to work really hard in the muscles out here to try and lift them up. Okay? So 2 different types of shin splints, but again, can be easily helped or changed. Shoes is a massive one. A lot of time people come in with shin splints and it's simply their shoes. And there's a lot of people wearing minimalist shoes, and they are great for people who've got good feet and good running posture. Some people who excessively pronate, or they haven't got the greatest hip stability, maybe they've got a bit of a Q angle. If the shoe doesn't have enough support on the inside, they may roll in too much, and that may be causing their shin splints. So check your shoes out. Make sure you're getting them professionally assessed when you buy the shoe, to make sure that if you're having shin splint problems, to make sure that you're in the right type of shoe to stop these things happening.
Erin had a question. Erin's from Brisbane. Where are you, Erin? She was down here a moment ago. She wanted to know, there she is. Can you run through your shin splints? And, at
No.
what point do you stop? Because I know we've all sort of started a run and gone, I'm feeling it a bit, and then sometimes they subside, but then sometimes they just get unbearable.
Yeah. Listen, shin splints, if they come on for the first time ever, when you've just started running for the first time, it may be a conditioning issue, especially if you run far too much in the first few weeks. That may be simply conditioning. You back down your running, you rest for a little bit, you do some strengthening exercises, some stretching exercises, work on the things we give you as far as calf flexibility and calf strength, and then improve your running program, and maybe don't go out so hard next time and see if it doesn't come back. But when shin splints come on and then don't go away, then you're running into problems. Okay? The worst one is when you've got shin splints to start with, and then during the run they get better, and then get really bad at the end of the run. And a lot of time people go for their run, a bit sore, and then halfway through the run, actually this is better, this is warmed up. I must be doing the right thing. That's actually usually blood flow and adrenaline knocking your pain out. And then it gets worse afterwards. So that's a worse type of shin splint. So I would really advise not to run through it. You need to maybe think about resting a little bit from the running. You still do all the cycling and the rowing and the swimming or whatever else you need to keep your body moving, keep your exercise going. Seek some advice about, is it shin splints, is it something else? Go through the stretches and exercises we give you, okay, and then try and work it out from there.
Okay, and that's a really good point, to find a substitute exercise if you do go through a period of niggles. Cross trainer is fantastic because it's low impact, it's a closed kinetic chain, which means your foot's attached to something, but it's a similar movement to running. So if you are having a break from running for whatever reason, rower, cross trainer, they're my 2 probably favourite substitute machines.
Great. And last in that, Achilles problem usually happens from tight calves or people running on their toes, or even mid-foot toe running, landing down and coming up again, which is a little bit complex. But if you're getting Achilles problems, it's usually biomechanical, meaning something's going wrong when you're running, or something's too tight, something's too weak, and that's where you work on trying to fix that. So let's go through. We've got 4 exercises and 4 stretches. I hope we can get this all done.
Yeah, let's just whiz everyone through them. These are all in the 12WBT plan. So you'll notice that on the running program, you've got your strength days as well. These are crucial because these are your prehab days. These are the days that we're doing things like strengthening your glutes, like stretching out and strengthening your calf muscles. We stretch the tight muscles, we strengthen the weak muscles. So they're just as important as your running days. The other thing is the 10% rule. We follow on the program a rule of around no more than 10% increase in distance per week, and that's again because you might feel like a bit of a hero initially where you're like, wow, I'm feeling quite fit, I'm just going to keep running and running and running, and that's where you do get your injuries. So that's why you'll see that particularly at the start of the program you're like, these distances aren't too bad, but we're following the 10% rule, adding your 10% distance week by week.
Great. So hip raises, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give my physio advice into your exercise that you're already doing on the 12WBT to help you with injury prevention. So when you're doing these hip raises, what I want you to aim for is making sure you always start with 2 legs if you've never done these before, and then progress to 1. But when you're pushing up, I want you to think about pushing your heel down to get your glute activated a little bit more. So what I mean is when I'm on here, when I push up, instead of trying to think about raising my hips, I want you to think about pushing your heels down into the ground and making sure you get that little pelvic tilt as you go up, so you're not arching your back when you do it. Because sometimes hip raises are great when you arch your back, especially in yoga, because it uses the whole part of the body. But if you're specifically trying to get those glutes going for your power through here, you've got to make sure, push through your heels, tilt your little pelvis under, and make sure you're driving down to raise your pelvis. Okay, so great one for glutes. Second one, these are the muscles we talked about. They rotate the hip underneath the glutes. Hip hitch holds are going to be great. Now, if I can use Amelia as my tree.
I'm a tree.
Yep. What I want you to aim for is when you push, I'm trying not to push her over.
That's all right. Oh, come on.
When I push in here, I want you to think about clenching the buttock at the same time. Okay? Now, if I can get my heel down here as well, if I can push my knee and my heel and clench my buttock, I'm going to be working really hard here. Okay? I'm also going to be working really hard on this side,
so
on my
that's both
stance leg.
sides.
The harder I push Amelia over, the harder I'm going to push here. Now, the good thing about that is you're working what we call open chain on this side, but closed chain on this side. Okay, so make sure you're trying to work both sides when you do that, because it's going to help control what is happening with the knee and alignment. All right? Third one, single leg squat. Now I'm going to use Amelia again. With the single leg squat, on the website, it goes all the way. I want you to work on for running halfway and focus on the hip part of the movement rather than the knee part of the movement. We see some people who get stuck into these exercises and they just do knee bends. Now, if you've got a sore knee, that's going to be pretty hard. So I want you to try and limit how much knee bend you do and increase how much hip bending you do. So I'm going to use Amelia. I might go this way. So think of a squat, how much you bend at the hips. Okay? Do exactly the same thing, sitting back like that. Okay?
And what I love, this is a really good, one of my favorite ones. What I love about this one is it's a great test for your stability. You know how we're talking about landing and rolling in? Well, when you go home tonight, stand in front of the mirror on one leg. Imagine there's a laser beam in the middle of your kneecap, and you want that laser beam to point forwards. But when you go down, if that laser beam's heading off in that direction, you know that that stability in your hip isn't there. If imagine you're doing this concentrating super, super slow and you can't even stabilize your knee, then chances are that every time you're running, hitting the ground, you're getting that internal rotation. So even if all you did after today was every day, 2 sets of 10 every night in front of the mirror and just focused on that laser beam, you're majorly improving that stability of your hips, and you could be preventing knee pain in the future.
Yep, exactly. So use that mirror in front of you for alignment this way. Don't forget to turn around this way, take a sneaky look that way, and make sure you're actually getting backwards as well. The last one of this, make sure you're thinking about your hip level. A lot of time it's forgotten, so people are concentrating, oh yeah, I've got to bend my hips, and got to bend my knee, and I've got to keep in line, but they're doing this. Okay, so keep your hips level. If you're thinking the front of your hips here, you can't drop one down. All right, so try and work on the level of your hips.
Okay, I know we're almost going to wrap up, but I really want to get a couple of questions from the audience. So,
right.
And while you guys are just putting your hands up to ask any questions, also wanted to remind you that we've got some prizes that we're giving away for social media gurus out there. So if anything's interested you today, either take a snap a photo or put it on Instagram or tweet, and as long as you do the hashtag 12WBTFest, not festy, no, fest for festival, that's right. Hashtag 12WBTFest. At the end of the weekend, we're giving prizes away for those that have posted through social. Now, do we have any questions out there? Okay, I can see one right there. We'll just do we'll have to do quick answers, but.
Oh, thank you. I'm actually sporting my first big injury. I've got 2 torn ligaments and a fragment off my ankle. What are the key kind of things for somebody who'd be going through this and myself to get started again, and then also when you are running in the future, what to keep an eye on?
Okay, are you seeing a physio for your rehab as well on that, or you're just doing it yourself? Or? Just
So
finished.
she's seeing a physio, and she's specialist to physio.
Great. Okay, I mean, it does depend on the severity. I mean, I rolled my ankle the other week, so I'm recovering as well. And some things these are you can't avoid. You land and you roll your ankle, and it might be a stone on the ground. So these sort of injuries that are not due to biomechanics, they're just due to chance. You've got to think about how long it's going to take. So seeing someone like a physio will give you a time frame. Now, if that time frame is healing, say 4 to 6 weeks, you've got to then double that for your rehab to get back to running. Okay, so if your healing time, okay, you've sprained your ankle, it's 4 to 6 weeks before it'll be pain-free and you're going. You need another 4 to 6 weeks before you're back to where you were running. Okay, usual general rule. All right, and that part there is where you need to work on your balance work and all that sort of stuff to get that ankle better and recondition yourself into running by slowly progressing it up over 6 weeks.
Okay, we've got time for one more question. I know there was a question about personal best. I'm going to hang around at the bottom of the stage. If anyone wants to talk about how to smash their PB in the next fun run, whether it be 10K, 4K, half marathon, marathon, I'll spend a few minutes with you down here. You can come to the front. But our final question over here. Oh, can't hear you, sorry.
I've been struggling with blisters since I started running. I've changed my shoes. I've bought specialist socks, and I'm still having trouble with them, and it's a pain in the arse.
Pain in the foot, right?
Where are the blisters?
Blisters. Do you know, can I just quickly say
On
on
your
Biggest
toes?
Loser, that's the biggest
Just
thing
under
that kills people, the blisters.
big toe, basically.
Big,
on just
not
that,
on the arch though. Just
just
okay.
on that soft spot under the big toe.
And have you got really thickened skin on your toes as well?
Not particularly.
No. It may be that you are landing too much on your toes, as we talked about with your heel runner, midfoot striker. Usually blisters are a combination of pressure, so you've got too much high pressure in that area, and sweat and rubbing. Okay, this is where you try the socks and all that sort of thing. Because a lot of time it's the sweat layer, it's the sock rubbing on the skin and pressure. So you might try all the socks in the world.
tying of your shoelaces as well. We've found that's really
I
helped.
have tried the shoelaces as well, and I
Yep.
mean, even yesterday I put sticky tape basically under those socks to see if that would help, and it did actually help a little bit, but it's so...
Have you used Second Skin before?
No.
Okay, there's a great product out there called Second Skin. It's basically, as it says, it's like second skin, and that used to be amazing for me, and that fixed any blisters that I ever had. Plus the fancy socks, plus making sure that your shoes are correctly fitted with the shoelaces.
Yeah.
So thank you all so much for hanging around today. Go and test your stability when you go home, and please think about setting a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal of a fun run, hopefully Mother's Day Classic, and we'll see you in the forum soon. Thank you.
And make sure if you want to go through some more stretches, that sort of thing, come up, you can see me. But they are on our website, so make sure you can download the little handout from today and you go through them.